You won't believe what happened that night. I was already in bed, the house quiet as always, when I heard a knock at the door. Midnight. I wasn't expecting anyone, certainly not him. What he said, and what followed, changed me in a way I never thought possible at my age. But before I tell you everything, let me ask, where are you watching from? I love seeing the comments light up with cities from all across the country. Tell me your city down below. New York, Dallas, Portland, anywhere. Now let me take you back to that night. I had just turned 77 a few weeks earlier. My life had slowed down to a rhythm that was predictable and mostly quiet. Mornings with tea, afternoons in the garden, evenings with a book or a bit of television. My husband passed years ago, and while I missed him dearly, I had made peace with the silence that settled into the house after he was gone. It wasn't a sad silence, just different. Daniel, my grandson, was always kind and attentive. He'd visit when he could. He was 26, busy building a life of his own, and I understood that. So when he called or stopped by, it was always a little gift. That particular night, the sky outside had turned a deep navy blue. The air felt heavy with moisture, the kind of thickness that presses gently against your skin, reminding you of summer's grip even in the dead of night. I had just finished brushing my teeth and was climbing into bed when I heard it. 3 quick, firm knocks on the front door. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Who would be knocking at that hour? I slipped on my robe and shuffled quietly down the hallway, my hand gliding along the wall for balance. I paused before the door, peeking through the small glass window at the top. And there he was, Daniel. His head was down, one hand in his pocket, the other holding something. I couldn't quite see what. My heart raced, not with fear, but confusion. Why would he come here so late without calling? I unlocked the door and opened it gently. Daniel? I whispered, blinking in disbelief. He looked up at me with tired eyes. "Aye, Grandma," he said, his voice soft, a little hoarse. "Can I come in?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said immediately, stepping aside. He walked in slowly, like his body was weighed down by more than just gravity. I closed the door behind him, watching him settle on the edge of the couch like someone trying not to fall apart. "Is everything all right?" I asked, sitting down beside him, my hand brushing gently over his shoulder. He nodded, then shook his head. "Don't know," he said. I didn't know where else to go tonight." That sentence hung in the air like a fog. I didn't want to pry too hard, but I could see in his eyes that something was wrong, really wrong. "Daniel, honey, talk to me. You can tell me anything. You know that." He smiled weakly and looked at me. "I know, Grandma. That's why I'm here." I reached over and took his hand in mine. His fingers were cold despite the warmth of the room. We sat there for a moment in silence. The television in the corner was still on, casting a soft glow across the room, flickering against the family photos on the wall. One of them was a picture of Daniel when he was 7, laughing with ice cream smeared across his face. He finally spoke. "I broke up with Alina tonight." I looked at him with quiet surprise. "Oh no." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. What happened?" He took a breath and leaned back, his head resting against the couch cushion. "It's been coming for a while, I guess. But tonight, it ended. And when it did, I didn't want to go home. I needed to be somewhere safe. I needed to see you." I could feel my heart breaking for him. There was so much pain in his voice, and yet something tender too, like he had returned to a place of comfort, like a boy who scraped his knee and ran straight to Grandma. "I'm glad you came here," I said softly. You're always safe here." He looked at me again, this time really looking. His eyes were glassy, a hint of tears forming, but not falling. "You always made me feel that way," he whispered, "even when I was a kid. When Mom and Dad were fighting, I'd wish I was here instead. That caught me off guard. I always knew there had been tension between his parents, but I hadn't realized how deeply he felt it as a child." "I didn't know you felt that way," I replied gently, brushing his hair back like I used to when he was little. "I'm sorry you had to go through that." "I guess I never told anyone," he said. "But with you, it's different. It always has been." Something passed between us in that moment. An understanding, maybe. Or something older, deeper. He wasn't a child anymore, and I wasn't just his grandmother in that moment. I was the person he had turned to when his world cracked open. We sat together for a while, just holding hands, letting the silence fill with unspoken emotion. The lamp on the side table flickered gently, casting soft shadows against the wall. Outside, crickets chirped and a breeze rustled the trees. Inside, it was warm, quiet, intimate. Eventually, I stood. "Come on, you need something warm. Let me make you tea." He followed me to the kitchen, and I busied myself with the kettle, trying not to let him see how shaken I was by his visit. There was something in his presence that night that stirred up feelings I hadn't faced in a long time. Loneliness, longing, and something else I didn't dare name just yet. He leaned against the counter, watching me. "I forgot how nice it smells here," he said with a small smile. "Like cinnamon and vanilla." "It's just the old wood cabinets," I said with a laugh, though I knew exactly what he meant. The scent of the house hadn't changed in decades. It was a comfort in itself. When the tea was ready, we returned to the couch, each with a mug in hand. He curled up at the far end like he used to, his feet tucked under him. I stayed close, but not too close, unsure of where the night was headed, but sensing that something important was beginning. "Grandma?" he asked after a few sips. "Yes. Sweetheart?" He hesitated, then said, "Can I stay the night?" "Of course," I replied without pause. "You can sleep in the guest room." He nodded, looking into his tea like it held some answer he couldn't quite find. "But," he added, voice softer now, "would it be okay if I stayed out here with you?" "Just for a little while?" I looked at him and saw more than just sadness. I saw a man who needed more than tea and sympathy. I saw someone who was searching for connection, for a moment of truth in a world that had suddenly grown too loud and too empty. "Of course," I said again, this time more tenderly. "You can stay right here as long as you like." He smiled, and we sat again in silence. This time, not as grandmother and grandson, but as two souls quietly holding on to the warmth of the moment. And in that quiet, something began to stir. Something neither of us had been ready for. The night stretched on like honey, slow, warm, and thick with things left unsaid. Daniel and I sat side by side on the couch, our tea slowly cooling, our bodies quiet but alert. The kind of silence that doesn't feel awkward, more like an embrace. The television had long since gone to its blue standby screen, humming softly, casting pale light over the living room walls. He hadn't let go of his mug yet, even though I could see it was empty. Maybe it gave him something to hold on to. Maybe I did too. I leaned my head back, my neck sinking into the familiar curve of the old couch cushion. My eyes wandered to the ceiling, then the old wooden beams, then back to him. "You sure you're comfortable out here?" I asked, my voice barely louder than the tick of the wall clock. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I just didn't want to be alone tonight." I gave a small smile. "You're not." He turned his head toward me, and for a moment our eyes met and held. That pause, just a few seconds, felt like it stretched between two versions of ourselves. The him who used to build Lego castles on my rug, and the man now sitting beside me, heart bruised, holding his breath through the quiet. He spoke first. You ever feel like you've been pretending to be okay for so long that even you forget you're not? I blinked at the rawness of his voice. It surprised me and moved me, because yes, I knew exactly what he meant. All the time, I answered, without hesitation. After your grandfather died, I pretended for months that I was fine. I told everyone I was managing, that I had my routines, that I didn't feel the emptiness in the morning when I'd wake up and reach over, and the bed was cold. Daniel watched me, still and quiet. I even told myself I was okay. I went on, until one night I stood in the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of milk, and I just started crying. I hadn't done anything special. I hadn't even thought of him at that moment. It just came out of nowhere, like the weight had finally decided to fall all at once. He nodded slowly. That's what happened tonight, he said. I was driving home after the fight. I got halfway there, pulled over, and just sat with my head on the steering wheel. I didn't even cry. I just couldn't move. I thought about calling a friend or checking into a hotel. But you came here. I finished for him. Yeah, I don't know why. It just felt like the only place that made sense. My heart ached, not in a bad way, in a way that made me feel human again. Needed, trusted. I reached out, brushing my fingers over the back of his hand again, not holding it this time, just connecting. You always have a place here, Daniel, no matter how old you get, no matter what happens. You don't have to pretend with me. He looked down, then took a breath and leaned his head against my shoulder. I felt my chest swell with emotion, maternal, familiar, but also something new, something more complex than I expected. A warmth, a closeness that stirred memories I hadn't touched in years. Memories of being touched, of closeness, of comfort that didn't come with blood ties and expectations. I didn't move. I just let him rest there. The scent of his hair reminded me of when he was little, when I used to rub baby lotion into his scalp after a bath. I could still feel the outline of his tiny body wrapped in a towel, clinging to me. But he wasn't that boy anymore, and I wasn't the same woman either. Do you ever miss being held? He asked quietly, not moving his head from my shoulder. The question stopped me. I could have answered with something light, something to brush it away, but I didn't. Yes, I whispered, more than I admit, even to myself. He didn't reply right away. His hand found mine again, this time curling around it gently. It's been years since someone just held me, he said. Not for a reason, not for anything physical, just to be close. I felt my heart squeeze. There was nothing inappropriate in his words, just honest loneliness, a deep, aching need that I recognized too well. So I shifted just enough to turn and wrap my arms around him, guiding his head to rest gently against my chest. He let out a slow breath, his body sinking into mine like he'd exhaled something he'd been carrying far too long. We stayed like that. I stroked his back slowly, rhythmically. There was nothing else in the world in that moment, just the rise and fall of our breathing and the slow unraveling of emotional knots too long ignored. I kissed the top of his head. "You're safe," I whispered. "Thanks, Grandma," he murmured. This means more than you know." And I believed him, because it meant more to me too, more than I'd expected. Not just the connection, but the reminder that even in our later years, we are still capable of giving comfort, and of needing it, too. We stayed wrapped in each other for a long time. Eventually, I felt his breathing slow, his body grow heavier against mine. He was asleep. I didn't move. I held him there, listening to the clock tick, the night hum around us, and the soft breath of someone who had finally found rest. And in that stillness, I realized something I hadn't dared say out loud in years. I missed being close, not just emotionally, physically, to be held, to feel the warmth of another person's body. It had been so long. My arms around Daniel weren't romantic. They weren't lustful, but they were full of something intimate and deeply human. Connection. And it was only the beginning of what that night would uncover for both of us. When I woke up, the room was dim and still. At first, I couldn't place where I was. Then I felt the steady warmth pressed against me and remembered Daniel. His head was still resting on my chest, his arms tucked gently around my waist, like he was holding on to something fragile, something he couldn't quite bear to let go of. Morning light seeped in through the curtain edges, casting a soft, pale glow over the living room. The TV screen was dark now, and the clock above it blinked 6:12 a.m. The quiet hum of the fridge in the kitchen was the only sound. I looked down at him, his lashes resting softly on his cheeks, his mouth parted slightly in sleep. He looked younger in that moment. Not quite the boy I once rocked to sleep, but not the man he was the night before either. Something in between. And I was somewhere in between too. Between protector and woman. Between comforter and companion. I let my hand stroke gently through his hair, my fingers brushing through the strands as lightly as breath. His scent lingered close, clean, warm, familiar, and I breathed it in without thinking, a quiet longing curling through my chest. Eventually, he stirred. Just a small shift, the way someone does when they're not quite ready to wake. But his arms tightened a little around me. His head shifted, his cheek brushing the fabric of my nightgown. "Grandma?" he mumbled sleepily, voice husky. "I'm here," I whispered. He opened his eyes slowly, blinking up at me. There was no panic in his expression, no embarrassment. Only calm. He stayed nestled against me, like waking up like this was the most natural thing in the world. "Did I fall asleep on you?" I smiled softly. "You did." "Sorry," he said, not moving. "Don't be. I didn't mind." We stayed like that for a while. Neither of us seemed to want to break the moment. Then slowly he sat up, rubbing the back of his neck. I adjusted myself too, tucking my robe tighter around me as I rose, and went to the kitchen. I needed a moment to breathe, to process the warmth still lingering on my skin from where he had laid. I busied myself with the kettle again, the same way I always did when emotions swirled too close to the surface. But I could feel him behind me, his presence not just in the room, but in the quiet hum between us. "You okay?" he asked from the doorway. I turned and gave a reassuring nod, "Just making us breakfast." He leaned against the doorframe. He looked different in the morning light. Softer somehow, more present. "I haven't slept that well in months," he said. "I'm glad," I replied. "You needed it." "You too," he added. "You looked peaceful." His eyes held mine a beat longer than expected, and I felt that tug again. The strange closeness that had crept in and now sat like a quiet truth between us. I turned back to the stove, pouring hot water over tea leaves. "I wasn't sure if staying was the right thing," he said, moving toward the counter, "but it was." I haven't felt this. Safe in a long time. I nodded, handing him a mug. Sometimes what we need isn't comfort, it's presence. Someone just being there. He took the tea and set it down, then did something that surprised me. He stepped forward and gently wrapped his arms around me from behind. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't rough. Just soft, grounding. His arms circled my waist, his cheek resting near my shoulder blade. I froze for a second, not out of fear, but out of the rush of emotion. My breath caught, and I closed my eyes. "I don't want to go yet," he whispered. "You don't have to," I replied. He stayed like that, and I let myself lean back just slightly into him. The warmth of his body was reassuring, and the rhythm of his breathing matched mine. It had been years, decades, since I'd been held like that. Not just for affection, but with a need for closeness, for understanding. And I didn't realize how much I'd needed it too. We sat together again at the table, this time with breakfast, toast, soft scrambled eggs, a slice of peach. Nothing fancy. But Daniel smiled like it was the best thing he'd tasted in weeks. He ate quietly, occasionally glancing up at me. I could feel his eyes on me even when I wasn't looking. Not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in a way that said he was paying attention, seeing me. "Grandma," he said suddenly, "do you ever wish things had turned out differently? In life?" I looked up, surprised by the question. "I mean," he continued, "you had Grandpa. You raised a family. You built a home. But was there ever something you wanted just for you?" I put down my fork, his words stirring something deeper. "Yes," I said. "There were things, small things, big things. I wanted to travel more. I wanted to write. Sometimes I wanted someone to see me as more than a mother or a wife, just as a woman." He looked at me for a long time. Then softly, "I see you." It was such a simple sentence, but it felt like someone cracked open a window that had been shut for years. Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. I looked away, wiping them gently with the edge of my napkin. "You're very kind." "It's not just kindness," he said. "You're beautiful, inside and out. I never realized it when I was younger, but I do now." My breath hitched. No one had called me beautiful in years. Not like that. Not with the weight of real truth behind it. There was no denying that something had shifted between us. The bond was still laced with love, but the way he looked at me, the way his voice softened, the way his touch lingered, it carried something more, something deeper. And I wasn't running from it. That night, he stayed again. This time, he didn't ask if it was okay. And I didn't hesitate to invite him. We sat on the porch under the stars after dinner, just talking. About everything. About nothing. The night wrapped around us like a blanket, the cicadas singing low, the breeze brushing against our skin. When we came back inside, he took my hand. "You sure?" he asked. I looked into his eyes, gentle, questioning, respectful. "Yes," I said. We stood together in the hallway, the lamplight casting shadows on the walls. Not as grandmother and grandson, not as family, but as two people, both grown, both searching for comfort, connection, and truth in a world that often forgets people our age still feel deeply, still long deeply. And when he leaned forward to kiss my cheek, tender, warm, slow, I didn't stop him. Because in that moment we were both just human. The air was thick with silence, the kind that holds its breath and waits. Daniel and I stood in the hallway, neither of us quite sure where to go from there. His kiss had been soft, respectful, barely more than a whisper of skin against skin. And yet it echoed inside me louder than anything I'd felt in years. I didn't move right away. I just stood there looking at him. His face was unreadable, somewhere between fear and wonder. I saw in his eyes the same question running through my own mind. What does this mean? But more than that, I saw gentleness, patience, a quiet ache that matched mine so perfectly it made my chest swell. I reached for his hand. We didn't speak as I led him to the couch again. The same place we'd started the night before, now infused with something deeper. We sat side by side. Our fingers remained intertwined, not urgently, just present, real. "I don't want this to be wrong," he said finally, his voice low. "It isn't," I answered, surprising even myself with how steady I sounded. "It's different, unexpected, but not wrong." He turned toward me. "I know we're family. I do, but tonight, I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about you, how you've always made me feel seen, how good it felt just being close to you. I've never had that with anyone else, not even Alina." My throat tightened, but I nodded. "I know, and I've never felt so. Understood. Not in years." The moment lingered, teetering on the edge of something fragile. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "You haven't," I replied. "You've reminded me that I'm alive." We sat in silence again, letting the gravity of the moment settle around us like dust. The house creaked softly with the wind, the curtains shifting slightly in the open window. The scent of the magnolia tree outside drifted in. Then slowly, with care, Daniel reached up and touched my cheek. His thumb brushed gently across the skin just beneath my eye. It wasn't a gesture of possession. It was reverence, like he was touching something sacred. "You're beautiful, Grandma," he said again, almost as a whisper. I closed my eyes, his hand still warm against my skin. And when I opened them, I saw no hesitation in his face, just clarity. We both knew we weren't stepping into something typical. But what we were stepping into wasn't born out of confusion or impulse. It was born from emotional truth and mutual vulnerability. That night, we didn't rush. He laid his head on my lap, and I stroked his hair like I used to when he was a boy. But the intimacy between us had changed. It was fuller now, shared. Not one giving and the other receiving, but two people meeting in the middle, both needing, both offering. Later, when he stood and took my hand again, there was nothing awkward between us. Just understanding. He stayed by my side the whole night. We didn't speak much. We didn't have to. We were careful. We were gentle. We were quiet in every way that mattered. And when the morning came, the sun pouring golden light through the blinds, I lay there beside him with a heart that felt fuller than it had in decades. I watched his chest rise and fall, listened to the birds singing beyond the window, and felt something so unfamiliar and yet so welcome. Peace. He stirred eventually, blinking in the morning sun. He turned toward me, a sleepy smile on his lips. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," I answered. He reached out and held my hand again, thumb brushing over my fingers. "I don't know what happens after this," he said. "Neither do I told him, "but I'm not afraid of it." He nodded. "Me neither." We got dressed slowly that morning, made breakfast, talked about little things, the birds outside, the way the tomatoes were growing in my garden, whether he should fix the screen door that had started to stick. It was almost normal, but not quite. The closeness between us wasn't fleeting. It stayed. It colored the way we looked at each other, the softness in our voices, the gentle touches that lingered a second longer than they used to. When he finally said he should head home, I walked him to the door. He turned back to me on the porch, the sunlight dancing across his face. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" I asked. "For letting me come to you, for not pushing me away, for just being there." I nodded. Always. Then he leaned in and kissed me again, this time not shy, but still gentle. And when he stepped off the porch and walked toward his car, I didn't feel sadness. I felt stillness, a quiet kind of joy. Later that day, as I sat on the porch with a fresh cup of tea, I looked out at the garden and thought about how strange life can be. How love doesn't always come the way you expect it. Sometimes it sneaks in through the side door, wrapped in the clothes of someone familiar. Daniel and I never labeled what happened. We didn't try to define it, but it changed us both. He visited more often after that, not always staying the night. Sometimes just for tea. Sometimes just to sit quietly beside me and talk. And though the world outside kept spinning, something inside me had shifted permanently. I no longer felt invisible. I no longer felt forgotten. Because someone had seen me, really seen me. And I had allowed myself to be seen, not just as a grandmother, but as a woman, a whole, feeling, breathing woman with desires, memories, warmth, and room still left for something new. And maybe that was the most unexpected part of all.